Hare Krishna devotees, welcome to day 86 of our Bhakti Vaibhava seminar on Srimad Bhagavatam 3rd Canto. And we are in chapter 29 and it's titled Explanation of Devotional Service by Lord Kapila, and we have reached verse 18. First of all, though, let us chant our prayers. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Shrimati Bhakti Vedanta Swaminiti Namane Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharane Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarane Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhar Shivas Adi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Vanchikapaturibhyas Cha Kripa Sindhubhya Eva Cha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Right, so yes, we're up to verse 18. So let's get into it. A devotee should always try to hear about spiritual matters and should always utilize his time in chanting the holy name of the Lord. His behavior should always be straightforward and simple. And although he is not envious, but friendly to everyone, he should avoid the company of persons who are not spiritually advanced. Right, okay, let's get into it here. There's a fairly substantial purport, 3 paragraphs. First point is, and what a point that this is, that in order to advance spiritually, we have to hear from authorities, authentic sources, about spiritual matters. We can understand spiritual life by strictly following regulative principles, controlling the senses, and to have control of ourselves. Then we have to be non-violent and truthful. No stealing. Hare Krishna. Yeah, thank you. No stealing. And abstain from sex life. That is definitely the best thing. Just ideally, as much as possible, completely abstain from sex life. Only possess what we really need to keep body and soul together. Not eat more than necessary. Not talk with common people, not collect more paraphernalia than we need, and we should follow all the rules and regulations in order to make advancement, and not just follow them for the sake of following them. Then the second paragraph, this is interesting. There are 18 qualifications mentioned in Bhagavad Gita. Prabhupada says among which is simplicity. Then there's we should be without pride. We should not demand unnecessary respect from others. We should be non-violent. We should be very tolerant and simple. We should accept the spiritual master. And we should control the senses. These are mentioned here, of course, and they're also mentioned in Bhagavad Gita. And of course, hear from authentic sources how to advance. That's in the verse itself. And actually, these instructions should come from an acharya and really be assimilated into the heart. And then a third paragraph is what is especially mentioned here is Nam Sankirtan. We should do Nam Sankirtan. We must chant the Hare Krishna Mahamantra. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. And we should do that either individually on our own or with others. Generally, of course, when it comes to real Nam Sankirtan, then we would do it with others. So Lord Chaitanya has stressed this, stress this chanting as the basic principle for spiritual advancement. Then another important term, another important thing to do is arjavena, means without diplomacy. We shouldn't make plans out of self-interest. Prabhupada makes the point, sometimes as preachers, we have to make plans, of course, to carry out the Lord's mission, but not for some personal material interest. And we should avoid those who are not interested in advancing spiritually. Then another word is Arya. Aryans are people who are advancing in knowledge of Krishna consciousness, particularly, and also advancing materially, material prosperity. But Prabhupada says the difference between an Aryan and non-Aryan, or you can say Sura and Asura, means godly person, Sura, or Asura means demoniac person. The difference is their standards of spiritual advancement. And we already more or less said that association with those who are not interested in spiritual advancement is forbidden. And Srila Lord Chaitanya famously advised asat sanga tyaga, that we must avoid persons who are attached to the asat, to temporary things. Prabhupada says asat means one who's too materially attached, who's not a devotee, too attached to women or the opposite sex, or too attached to enjoyable material things. And such a person, Prabhupada concludes the paragraph by saying, such a person, according to Vaishnava philosophy, is a persona non grata. Yes, an undesirable person. That's a very formal way of an undesirable, saying an undesirable person. So, Srila Prabhupada makes the point, the devotee should not be proud of his acquisitions. You know, that I've got a nice car, a nice computer, and these types of things. And one of the important symptoms of a devotee particularly means like a progressive devotee who is making advancement, is two things, symptoms: meekness and humility. I mean, they're very closely related. Meekness basically means very gentle, and humility, of course, means very humble. So devotees, even though they may be spiritually very advanced, but they always remain meek and humble. And we learn that by the example of Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami and others who have taught us by their personal example. Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami, it's in Chaitanya Charitamrita, I forget exactly whereabouts it is. He says that I am lower than the worm in stool. Anyone who simply hears my name becomes fallen. This is his extreme meekness and humility, because actually it is not, he is not lower than the worm and stool, to put it mildly. He is actually very great devotee. And he says, anyone who hears my name becomes sinful. Anyone who hears his name is highly benefited spiritually. So anyway, Lord Chaitanya said, third verse of Shikshastakam, that we should be humbler than the grass on the street, more tolerant than a tree. And Prabhupada concludes the purport by saying, one should not be proud or falsely puffed up. In this way, one will surely advance in spiritual life. Right, so on to verse 19. When one is fully qualified with all these transcendental attributes, and his consciousness is thus completely purified, he is immediately attracted simply by hearing my name or hearing of my transcendental quality, because this is the Supreme Lord. This is Lord Kapila speaking. He's the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Right, so there's a short purport here. At the beginning, some time before, when the Lord began his instructions to Mother Devahuti, the Lord told his mother, Madguna Shruti Matrena. If we simply hear the name, quality, form, etc. of the Lord, one becomes immediately attracted. And if we follow the transcendental rules and regulations from Shastra, then we become fully qualified with all transcendental qualities. Of course, because this material world is what it is, it's a very degraded place, then through having been here in this world and having received so much material association over however many years, so we have developed, undoubtedly, some unnecessary qualities. But if we follow this process as described right here, what we've been reading about, following the rules and regulations, hearing Madguna Shruti Matrena, hearing the names of the Lord, his qualities, etc., like this, then we'll become free from all that acquired contamination. that we managed to pick up. Yes. So Prabhupada concludes the purport by saying, to develop transcendental qualities, as explained in the previous verse was 18, one must become free from these contaminated qualities. So on we go to verse 20. As the chariot of air carries an aroma from its source and immediately catches the sense of smell, similarly, one who constantly engages in devotional service in Krishna consciousness can catch the Supreme Soul, who is equally present everywhere. So again, there is a short to moderate purport. It's definitely not very short, but it's not at all long. So Prabhupada says that a breeze carries fragrance from a flower garden, and then our organ of smell, our sense of smell, and the organ of smelling becomes captured. So our consciousness, at least when it's saturated with devotion, with bhakti, can immediately capture the transcendental existence of the Lord. After all, he's Paramatma, he's Super Soul, in the heart of every living being. In Bhagavad Gita, the Lord says that he is Kshetragya. He's present in this body and simultaneously in every body. So of course we are only in this body. We're not in other bodies, but he is. So we are present only in one particular body, and we become altered. It's an interesting way of putting it. We become affected when another individual soul doesn't cooperate with us. The super soul, though, is present, equally present everywhere. The individual souls may disagree and get upset with each other. That's what's being discussed, a few seconds ago. Altered. The individual soul is altered when another individual soul doesn't cooperate with him. So we may disagree, individual souls, but the super soul is unchanging, not altered by the changing situations or changing moods of different other souls. So therefore the super soul is called avikari, means unchanging. So, but anyway, when the jiva, the individual soul, is fully saturated with Krishna consciousness, then he can understand the presence of the super soul. Bhagavad Gita confirms a person saturated with devotional service in full Krishna consciousness can understand the Supreme Personality of Godhead either as Super Soul or as the Supreme Person. Super Soul, of course, within the heart. Supreme Person means the Lord, generally means in the kingdom of God, or as he descends for his pastimes, as Krishna did 5,000 years ago. And just we just mentioned how Bhagavad Gita confirms that a person saturated with devotional service can understand the Lord. But Prabhupada actually quoted the verse, it's 1855, and it has been quoted really on quite a number of occasions. Bhakti Bijanati, which means that a person saturated with devotional service can understand the Lord. Okay, so on with verse 21. I am present in every living entity as the supersoul. If someone neglects or disregards that supersoul everywhere and engages himself in the worship of the deity in the temple, that is simply imitation. How do you like that? That's pretty powerful, isn't it? Simply imitation. If you engage in deity worship in the temple, but you neglect the presence of the super soul. So again, there's a shortish purport. So in purified consciousness, Krishna consciousness, you can see the presence of Krishna everywhere. Or feel the presence, it depends on your level, really. Therefore, on that basis, if you only do deity worship and you don't care for other living entities, you're on a very low stage of devotional service. Prabhupada says, lowest stage means Kanishta Adhikari. Kanishta Adhikari is fond of worshipping the deity in the temple, which is nice, but just doesn't have the realization to respect other living entities on the basis that the Lord is within their hearts, as well as in the temple. Right. So therefore a devotee should try to understand everything in relationship with Krishna, try to serve everything in that spirit. Yeah. Serve other living entities. So this term, to serve everything, means to engage everything in the service of Krishna. So Prabhupada gives an explanation. If a person is innocent and does not know his relationship with Krishna, an advanced devotee should try to engage him in the service of Krishna. Innocent means kind of open-minded, open-hearted, not opposed to Krishna consciousness. Yeah, that's an innocent person. But at the same time, they're sort of open-hearted, open-minded, and they have not got like an attitude problem towards God. But at the same time, they don't know their relationship with Krishna. So then the advanced devotee should try to engage that person in Krishna's service. And Prabhupada concludes the purport by saying, one who's advanced in Krishna consciousness can engage not only the living being, but everything in the service of Krishna. Verse 22. One who worships the deity of Godhead in the temples, but does not know that the Supreme Lord is Paramatma, is situated in every living entity's heart, must be in ignorance, and is compared to one who offers oblations into ashes. Yeah. Means in a fire sacrifice, if there's no fire, there's just ashes. The whole fire sacrifice is finished, basically. But then if you offer ghee into the ashes, it's just foolish. It's just a waste, and there'll be no benefit. So, right, let's look at the purport. There's a little bit more substantial purport here. It's definitely more substantial. So as we know, and as just been said in the last few verses, the Supersoul is the plenary expansion Supersoul, is present in all living entities. And there are 8,400,000 species, of course. And the Lord is in every one of those bodies as the individual soul to start off with, but then as the super soul. And you might wonder how we could say that the Lord is present in everybody as the individual soul and as the super soul. Super soul, of course, we understand, that's very well known. But what is this? The Lord is living in everybody as the individual soul. I mean, that's us. But now Prabhupada's saying it's the Lord. So Prabhupada explains, since the individual soul is part and parcel of the Lord, in that sense, the Lord is living in every body as the individual soul. And of course, as super soul, he's present as a witness. But in both cases, the presence of God in every living entity is essential. Right, so Srila Prabhupada points out people who say they belong to some religion, but they don't feel the presence of the Lord in every living entity. In every living entity and just everywhere, Prabhupada says they're in the mode of ignorance. Right. So there's a second paragraph. So if, without this preliminary knowledge of the Lord's omnipresence, you simply attach yourself to some rituals in some religious institution, temple, church or mosque, and you got no knowledge, no preliminary knowledge of the Lord's omnipresence, and you just become officially attached to rituals in some religious organization, it's like you're offering butter into ashes or ghee rather than into the fire. So we offer sacrifice. Sacrifice is offered by pouring ghee into a fire while Vedic mantras are chanted. But the thing is, even if there are Vedic mantras, everything else is nice, but there's no fire, there's just ashes, and you pour the ghee into the ashes, Prabhupada says, such a sacrifice will be useless. So what does this mean to us? It means that a devotee should not ignore any living entity. The devotee must know that in every living entity, even a living entity just insignificant like an ant, but the Lord is present. And therefore every living entity should be treated very nicely and shouldn't be subjected to any violence. It really must not. But in the modern so-called civilized society, slaughterhouses are regularly maintained and supported by a certain type of religious principle. What sort of religious principle is that, my Lord? Krishna, Krishna. But that's going on. That's going on. So Prabhupada concludes the purport by saying, but without knowledge of the presence of God in every living entity, any so-called advancement of human civilization, either spiritual or material, is to be understood as being in the mode of ignorance. We move on to verse 23. One who offers me respect, but is envious of the bodies of others, and is therefore a separatist, never attains peace of mind, because of his inimical behavior towards other living entity. In this verse, there are two phrases which are significant. All right, so one of them is Bhuteshu Bhadavirasya, inimical towards others, and Dvishata Parakaye, envious of another's body. These are significant. Krishna. So, first point, Prabhupada makes the point. One who is envious of others, inimical towards others, never experiences any happiness. That's really very important and very profound. So the vision of the devotee must be perfect, Prabhupada says, should ignore bodily distinctions and see only the presence of the part and parcel of the Supreme Lord. And that's us, the living entities, and should see the Lord himself in his plenary expansion as Supersoul. This is perfect. This is perfect vision. This is what we should see. Prabhupada says, that is the vision of a pure devotee. So, the body, in effect he's saying, the body of a particular type of living entity is always ignored by a devotee, by a real devotee. That's true. That is really significant. So on we go to the second paragraph. Prabhupada says that it's expressed herein that the Lord's always eager to deliver the conditioned souls who are entangled, encaged here. And how to do that? The devotees must carry the message or the desire of the Lord and deliver that to those conditioned souls, and in this way enlighten them in Krishna consciousness. And in this way, those people may be elevated to the transcendental level, spiritual life, and the mission of their lives will be successful. So, a very important point, even though we see all living entities equally and we don't want to make distinctions too much. And Prabhupada just said at the end of the previous paragraph that the body is always ignored by the devotee. But still we have to recognize that it's not really possible for living entities lower than humans to be spiritually elevated, and particularly to the point that the mission of their lives is successful. In other words, they become perfect in Krishna consciousness. It doesn't really work like that. Actually, other living entities and other species can be helped. Prabhupada gives the example, Shivananda Sain delivered a dog by feeding him prasadam. And Prabhupada says, important point, distribution of prasada or remnants of foodstuffs offered to the Lord, even to the ignorant masses of people and to animals, gives such living entities the chance for elevation to Krishna consciousness. Factually, it happened that the same dog, in the case of Shivananda Sain, the same dog, when met by Lord Chaitanya at Puri, was liberated from the material condition. So Prabhupada makes the point, it is especially mentioned here that a devotee must be non-violent. Yes, Jiva Himsa. Lord Chaitanya recommended that we not commit any violence to any living entity. So sometimes, it may seem like a bit of an unusual point, but sometimes the question is raised, and I've had it raised to me more than once, that since vegetables have life, and devotees eat vegetables, so isn't that violence? Prabhupada does make a point that, first thing, taking some leaves or twigs or fruit from a tree or a plant doesn't kill the tree or the plant. That's something. But, so Prabhupada goes on though, besides that, Jiva Himsa means every living entity has to go through a particular type of body according to his past karma. And even though we're eternal, still we shouldn't be disturbed by this gradual evolution. So a devotee has to execute devotional service, the principles of devotional service, exactly as they are, and know the Lord is present in even the most insignificant living entity. So Prabhupada concludes the purport by saying, a devotee must realize this universal presence of the Lord. Verse 24, my dear mother, even if he worships with proper rituals and paraphernalia, a person who is ignorant of my presence in all living entities never pleases me by the worship of my deities in the temple. Wow, that's pretty amazing, isn't it? Yeah. Even if he worships properly, but he's ignorant of the Lord's presence in every living entity, never pleases the Lord. In other words, it's not going to get the mercy of the Lord. Even by worshipping deities in the temple. All right, so now let's go into the purport. It's somewhat extensive. There are 64 different prescriptions, different things we must do for worship of the deity in the temple. There are all sorts of items that must be offered. Some are valuable, some are less valuable. Lord Krishna in Bhagavad Gita says that if a devotee offers me a small flower, one, a leaf, one, some water, or a little fruit, even one fruit, I'll accept it. So the real purpose is not exactly that the Lord is hungry or thirsty. The real purpose is you're getting an opportunity to express some devotion, to do something with some feeling in service to the Lord. So the actual offerings, the items as such, are secondary. The main thing is that the devotee gets the opportunity to offer something with devotion. And Prabhupada goes on to say that if someone has not developed devotion and tries to offer some food or fruits or whatever without devotion, the Lord will not accept the offering. And Prabhupada puts it very nicely, we cannot bribe the Lord. Yeah, he's so great. You think he's going to be bribed by one flower? And of course, he doesn't need anything. He's not in scarcity. He's completely full in everything in himself. So what can we offer him? He produces everything. So Prabhupada says, we simply offer to show our love and gratitude to the Lord. Second paragraph, this love and gratitude is best offered by a pure devotee who knows that the Lord is in every living entity. So therefore, temple worship, Prabhupada says, necessarily includes distribution of prasad. It is not just that we make a temple in our own private house or place, offer something to the Lord in our house, and then we eat. And Prabhupada makes the point that it's better than not offering, just preparing things and just eating them. But I mean, if we do like that, we just take food, we don't offer it, we just eat it. Prabhupada says that's like animals. But the devotee, progressive devotee, knows the Lord is in every living entity and must be, and knows it's important to be compassionate. Yeah. So therefore we should exhibit some compassion to the ignorant by distributing prasadam. And that, Prabhupada says, that is essential for our relationship with the Lord. Yeah. So there's a third short paragraph. Real love and devotion is accepted by the Lord. Someone may, a rich person, be able to offer all sorts of opulent foods and cloth and jewelry and anyway, but in regards to this example here, if someone is not hungry, if someone is completely full, they've just eaten too much and they just cannot eat any more, then even if you offer them something really nice, it's useless. The person won't accept it. Similarly, we can offer very nice things to the deity, but if we have no real devotion and no real sense of the Lord's presence everywhere, then we're lacking in devotional service. And Prabhupada concludes the purport. In such a state of ignorance, we cannot offer anything acceptable to the Lord. Verse 25, performing his prescribed duties, one should worship the deity of the Supreme Personality of Godhead until one realizes my presence in his own heart and in the hearts of other living entities as well. Right, so you should worship the deity until you start getting realization of the Lord's presence. Deity worship is prescribed, Prabhupada says. It's prescribed also for those who are simply discharging prescribed duties. Basically means, as Prabhupada goes on to explain, basically means your duties according to Varna ashram. Yeah. So therefore, in this respect, you should just continue worshipping the deity until you appreciate the presence of the Lord in all living entities. So don't just be satisfied that, look, see, I did my duty. No, you must realize your relationship with the Lord, and through that, along with that, your relationship the relationships of all other living entities with the Lord. And if Prabhupada concludes the paragraph by saying, if he does not understand this, then even though he discharges his prescribed duties properly, it is to be understood that he is simply laboring without profit. And there's a short second paragraph here. The word swakarma krit, Prabhupada says, is very significant. And it means, swakarma krit means one who does prescribe duties. And here, in this case, the idea is that it's not that when you become a devotee or you engage in devotional service, that you are advised that you should or you must give up these prescribed duties. Prabhupada makes the point, no one should be lazy under the plea of devotional service. Actually, Prabhupada, I was told, said, in Krishna consciousness is not a place for lazies or crazies. How's that? So no one should be lazy under the plea of devotional service. We must do our duties. Prabhupada concludes the purport by saying, swakarma krit means that one should discharge the duties prescribed for him without neglect. All right, on to verse 26. As the blazing fire of death, I cause great fear to whoever makes the least discrimination between himself and other living entities because of a differential outlook. So there's a very short purport here. It's actually just one sentence. Let me just read it. There are bodily differentiations among all varieties of living entities, but a devotee should not distinguish between one living entity and another on such a basis. A devotee's outlook should be that both the soul and supersoul are equally present in all varieties of living entities. Verse 27. Therefore, through charitable gifts and attention, as well as through friendly behavior, and by viewing all to be alike, one should propitiate me, who abide in all creatures, as their very self. All right, so there's a substantial purport here. Prabhupada begins by saying we shouldn't misunderstand that because the supersoul is within the heart of a living entity, that the individual soul within whose heart the supersoul is dwelling, now that individual soul in that body has become equal to the supersoul. Prabhupada says that the equality of the supersoul and the individual soul is misconceived by the impersonalist. And here, Prabhupada notes, here it's clearly said that the individual soul should be recognized in relationship with the Supreme Lord. The method of worshipping the individual soul is described here as either giving charitable gifts or behaving in a friendly manner, free from any separatist outlook. How's that? That's interesting. The impersonalist thinks that the individual soul is Daridra Narayan, that the Lord Narayan, who somehow become poor. But that That is a contradiction. That is just so ridiculous. It's a contradiction because the Supreme Lord is full in all the opulences, all 6 opulences. And therefore, he can agree to live with a poor person within the heart of a very poor person, or even with an animal. But it doesn't make him poor. So there are 2 Sanskrit terms here that are used here, which are mana indicates a superior, and dana indicates one who gives charitable gifts or is compassionate towards an inferior. So devotees, of course, we cannot treat the Lord as an inferior who is dependent on our charity. Charity is really for someone economically inferior. Generally, charity is not given to a rich man. So here, Prabhupada says, similarly, it is explicitly stated here that mana, respect, is offered to a superior, and charity is offered to an inferior. So the living entities, according to their karma, may become rich, they may become poor, but the Lord is unchangeable. He's always full in 6 opulences: wealth, beauty, fame, knowledge, renunciation, and strength. So if we treat living entities equally, it doesn't mean we're treating them as we would treat the Lord. Compassion and friendliness don't necessitate. If we treat a person compassionately or in a friendly way, it doesn't mean that we are falsely elevating them to the position of the Lord. No. Doesn't mean we have to falsely elevate them either. At the same time, Prabhupada says, we shouldn't misunderstand that the supersoul in the heart of an animal like a hog and the supersoul situated in the heart of a learned Brahmin are different. The supersoul in all living entities is the same Supreme Lord, same person in many forms, same person, not different persons. So he is omnipotent, so he can live anywhere and everywhere. And he can create a Vaikuntha situation anywhere, no problem. So Srila Prabhupada concludes the purport by saying, therefore, when Narayan is living in the heart of a hog, he does not become a hog Narayan. He is always Narayan and is unaffected by the body of the hog. So devotees, that's the end of that section. Now we go to section 4, verse 28 to verse 30, so it's only 3 verses. And the subject matter is Kapila explains different grades of entities. So I'm just going to go straight through it without reading the verses beforehand. Verse 28 to verse 30. So verse 28. The living entities are superior to inanimate objects, O Blessed Mother. And among them, living entities who display life symptoms are better. Animals with developed consciousness are better than them, and better still are those who have developed sense perception. Okay, there's a purport here. So the previous verse said, living entities should be honored by gifts and friendly behavior. Now in this verse and verses following, descriptions are given of when to be friendly and when to be charitable. Yeah, an example. So the verse itself was talking like that. Example, the tiger is a living entity, part of the Lord, lords in his heart as super soul. Doesn't mean we have to treat him in a friendly way. We have to treat him charitably and give him prasadam. So saintly people who live in forests, they do that. Yeah. Treat them like dogs are treated. Okay, so according to the Vedic system, dogs shouldn't come inside. They're unclean. They should be trained to stay outside. But still, a compassionate householder gives the dog prasadam, and then the dog eats it outside. So you must treat them compassionately, but not like humans. A feeling of equality must be there, but the treatment should be discriminating and appropriate in terms of the cases involved. So Prabhupada concludes the paragraph by saying, just how discrimination should be maintained is given in the following 6 verses concerning the different grades of living conditions. All right. So the first division is to distinguish dead matter from living entities. Prabhupada makes really quite an amazing point. A living organism is sometimes manifested even in stone. Hills and mountains sometimes grow, and this is due to the presence of a soul in that stone. So, but above that is the actual conscious living entities. And then the next stage up is when there's the development of real sense perception. So the moksha dharma, which is part of Mahabharata, says the trees have sense perception. They see and smell. Prabhupada says, we know by experience trees can see. Sometimes they change course of development to avoid hindrances. They're growing, but then they go around something and then continue growing. So Prabhupada concludes the purport by saying, this means that a tree can see, and according to Mahabharata, a tree can also smell. This indicates the development of sense perception. So we'll carry on tomorrow. Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai.